Hey guys, it's Goosebumps Completionist, and today I'm bringing you a book review from the classic original 62 book series, and it's book number 48, Attack of the Jack-O-Lanterns. I'm going to be honest, I don't love this book by any means, but I really enjoy it for what it is. I think, as far as Halloween goes, I think this story is definitely one of those books that capture Halloween, I think the best out of all the books, even Haunted Mask for that matter. And I love the Haunted Mask. I haven't reviewed it on my channel yet, but I hold that book to high regard. But in the aspect of setting and time periods being utilized in the book, time period of the year being Halloween, I think this one captures it the best, I would say. This book is one of the shorter Goosebumps books that came before Horrorland. This is only like 113 pages. This book is a breeze. There's not a lot to really talk about or go over. It doesn't really go into too much depth. So in this review, it's going to be very surface level because it's very easy to spoil things. But I just want you to note before I go into the plot overview and then the review portion, yeah, I really like this book, but I don't love it. That's what I'm going to say. So the plot overview basically starts out the story with this girl named Drew, who explains who she is and gives a little bit of backstory about her family and kind of prefaces the time of year Halloween and how it's her favorite time of year. It's a favorite holiday. However, it gets spoiled by these two kids, which are Tabby and Lee. And the problems Drew has had with these two individuals have gone back 2 years. And they haven't only tormented her, they have tormented her and her friends. One of her friends being Walker, which is her absolute best friend. And then two of her friends that are twins, Shane and Shauna. And Drew kind of goes back in time and tells, the situation that happens 2 years prior to the current timeline of the story. And it basically starts out with Drew and her friends get invited to this Halloween party at Tabby's house. And it's basically revealed that Tabby and Lee pulled a massive prank on them at their party by basically staging a home invasion prank with the older kids that lived next door to Tabby's house. And they all laughed and basically embarrassed Drew, Walker, Shan, and Shauna, which they carried that anger with them over to the next Halloween, which carries into the next flashback Drew goes into, which takes place a year prior to the current timeline of the book, where the four of them decided to stage a prank, a massive prank to scare Lee and Tabby at Drew's Halloween party. And they went through all this effort, went through all of this planning. They went out of their way to assure that Tabby and Lee were going to come. And then at the 11th hour on Halloween night, Tabby and Lee decide to bail. And they decide to go trick-or-treating with some of, I think, Lee or Tabby's cousins in a really nice neighborhood that hands out like full-size candy bars. So Drew is basically still out for revenge. It's Halloween time again. And she still hasn't forgotten what had happened 2 years prior. And she's basically dead set on getting revenge on these kids. So basically, after the flashbacks are over, the story cuts into a dream sequence, basically, where Drew daydreams a situation where her group of friends and I think Lee and Tabby as well are trick-or-treating, and they knock on this old person's door, and they let them in, and they take them upstairs to see the husband who can't really walk all that well, and there's a room full of kids trapped, and the old man says, "You must stay here and show me your costumes forever." And then Drew wakes up from the daydream nightmare thing, and basically assures that to the reader that she can't get her mind off Lee and Tabby, and she wants to come up with the perfect idea to get them back for Halloween. Now, Lee and Tabby are kind of like, I would say they're kind of mean-spirited kids. throughout the story. I'm going to kind of skip over some stuff that really doesn't matter. Let's cut to the part where Drew, Walker, Shane, and Shauna finally come up with a plan to kind of get revenge on Lee and Tabby, but Drew has to call them and convince them to come trick-or-treating with them, which she surprisingly does. And then Drew and Walker go to meet Lee and Tabby on Halloween night to go trick-or-treating so they can set up the prank. However, Shane and Shauna are nowhere to be found, and as they're walking in the neighborhood, they encounter these two pretty horrific, very tall, like over 7 foot tall jack-o'-lanterns. Now these jack-o'-lanterns basically spew fire out of their mouth, and to kind of imagine it, just look at the cover, the iconic Tim Jacobus art here, and that's basically what it would look like. Now these jack-o'-lanterns say, follow us, we'll take you to this neighborhood, it's perfect for trick-or-treating, you will get so many houses, you'll fill up your bags of candy, and we'll have fun. So, Lee and Tabby kind of figure that maybe these jack-o'-lanterns are Shane and Shauna, but they go along with it anyway. They go to this path that takes them to this neighborhood via the help of the jack-o'-lanterns. Now, when they get there, they don't really recognize the neighborhood, but they do notice that it is perfect for trick-or-treating. So Drew, Walker, Shane, not Shane and Shauna, Drew, Walker, and Lee and Tabby start trick-or-treating, and they start filling up their bags. They're getting mounds and mounds and mounds of candy. But this is where the story gets kind of scary now. So when they start filling up their bags and they're starting to get tired, they want to go home. But the jack-o'-lanterns don't want them to leave. They want them to stay in this neighborhood and trick-or-treat forever. It's getting late. They keep having to knock on houses after like 10 o'clock, after 11 o'clock. And it gets to one point where they get so much candy, they have to start eating their candy. And which kind of makes Tabby ill, and Tabby and Lee have had enough of this, and they want to see once and for all who's behind these jack-o'-lanterns. And when they go up to the jack-o'-lanterns, something happens to them which scares them and finally gives them the revenge that Drew's been looking for. But Drew and Walker are still not in on the whole situation. And then it's revealed that they were actually, and plot twist, something happens. Big reveal. I'm not going to say what it is. It's kind of obvious, but I'm not going to spoil that part. And then the ending kind of ties to something I didn't touch on here. I kind of skipped over it. But basically all I needed to know is there was a string of disappearances leading up to Halloween night, and Drew's parents were kind of apprehensive of them going out trick-or-treating because of these weird disappearances. And these disappearances have been linked to something supernatural or out of this world, and I'll leave it at that. And that basically in a nutshell is Attack of the Jack-o'-lanterns. Let's start out with the positives of this story. What I really like about this story is the strong setting. I like how it took time to set up that Halloween atmosphere. And I think it's one of the better Halloween atmosphere books, if not the best Halloween atmosphere a Goosebumps book has offered. It's just straight Halloween. It just captures that emotion, that feeling, that nostalgia, that inner kid with you, especially me as an adult. It just took me back to that place reading this, and I really enjoyed it for that. It's almost like reading a time capsule, because these days kids don't really trick-or-treat as much. And for that aspect, I don't know if this book is kind of dated on that, but it is basically solely around trick-or-treating and pranks and stuff that Halloween is usually about. Drew as a character, she's not the best character, but she works pretty well here. I think that Drew has a lot of sympathy going for her, very relatable. Walker, Shane, and Shauna are good supporting characters. Honestly, for villains, I think Lee and Tabby are pretty good villains, even though I don't know, I'd really call them the real villains, given the whole encompassing story here. I don't want to spoil the ending, like I said, but they were pretty good too. I have no complaints on the characters. And overall, I think the twist at the end is definitely one of the more memorable twists in all of the original series, at least. I think a lot of people remember this, and if you have read this, you know what I'm talking about. This is just a really iconic book in that regard. But the negatives I have with this book stem down to how this book is structured. This book is only 113 pages long. It's one of the shortest Goosebumps books there is, especially in this time period. I think this is like pushing I Live in Your Basement for page number, and that book had really low pages as well. But this book, however, since it's only 113 pages, it's easy to kind of break this down into thirds here. You got the first third, which is the first 38 pages, and then you have a middle portion, and then the remainder of the book is the the climax and the finale. My complaint, though, is in the first 38 pages of this book. The first 38 pages just spends too much time with flashbacks, and then it cuts right into a daydream to boot. I do not like that. It takes like all the way up to chapter 9 or 10 to even get going in the modern timeline. And I honestly think this book, even though it's only 113 pages, this book could easily be trimmed at least 20 to 25 pages. Easily. And this kind of makes me feel like this book doesn't deserve to be a full-length book. This could have been a short story, kind of like something that would have been in triple header or something. I still really enjoy this story, but I truly feel that this book has no means to be a full book. That's just me. Unless they changed up the first third of the book a little bit and kind of focus less on the flashbacks and the daydreams and focus more on setting up the modern day stuff. It just didn't do that. And I felt like that this book suffered because it just spent too much time, especially a significant part of the book, not dealing with present day. I think it's important to set up the exposition and the backstory to Drew and her friends' animosity towards Lee and Tabby, but to that page extent, I think was kind of extreme there. And another little mild negative I have is in the third part of this book, the climax and stuff. I felt like there could have been a little more. I'm not wishing for more. I think there should have been more stuff going on with the jack-o'-lanterns in the neighborhood when they're trick-or-treating. It's very linear in this story when it gets to the present day part. It's just very linear. Nothing really, spikes at you. Nothing really jumps at you. It just happens, and, that's what it is. I kind of wish they spent a little more time elaborating on, maybe some abilities of the jack-o'-lanterns, or maybe expanded a little bit on the end. But, yeah, I feel like the third part of this book really just felt kind of flat in some ways. So, yeah, I think this book is a really good book. I think it's definitely warranted for people saying that this is one of the better Goosebumps books. I do agree with that. I think it's above average. I don't quite think it makes it there for me to give it an excellent rating. So from a 0 to 5 stars, I think with the first third of this book and the final third of this book having its issues for me, especially the first third, I deducted like 0.5 off just for the first third of this book. I think it was just too drawn out. It took too long to get to the point and get to the actual story. And I deducted 0.2 off for the last third of the book for just kind of feeling flat. So all in all, I deducted 0.7 off, giving it a 4.3 out of 5, which I think is a pretty fair rating for this book. It's above average. It's right in the middle of that above average tier. It's a few points shy for me from being an A book, but I do think it's a solid B tier book, and it's really good. I highly recommend this, especially around this time of year, around Halloween. You need to read Attack of the Jack-O'-Lanterns if you haven't read it. It will definitely trigger that nostalgic emotion, the inner kid within you, and get you in the spirit for Halloween. So yeah, that's my review for Attack of the Jack-O'-Lanterns. Let me know in the comment section if you have read this book. Did you love this or did you hate this? I'm dying to know, and I'll see you next time.